Welcome to the Black Advancement. I am your host / moderator, Ajiman Jasante Goodman, and thank you for joining us for our first symposium of 2023 entitled Do Protests Work? On the screen with me, I have Antoine Smallwood, TJ Goodman, Michelle Owens-Martin, and Greg Goodman. And again, we're talking about Do Protests Work? But before we get into that today, let me tell you what Black Advancement is all about. Black Advancement is a nonprofit organization that seeks to combat problems within the Black community through action and dialogue. Before we get into our topic today, let me hit you all with a little bit of a front street. Since the election of Trump in 2016 and the tumultuous year of 2020, protesting has once again become a consistent thing here in America. Although there have been some notable protests in the 21st century that are definitely earth-shaking, the frequency of protests have been made a part of modern day life, modern day existence, I should say, for the children these days. This public upheaval has not been seen since the 1960s, which brought forth the civil rights movement, anti-war activism, women's liberation, and of course, Southern strategy. But even with all the outcry exhibited and seen today, nothing much seems to change. This is displayed in the tragic murder of Tyre Nichols in Memphis by 5 police officers, only a mere 3 years since the biggest protest in the history of America over the exact same issue. Yes, the cops were arrested and fired relatively quickly. There could be another reason for that. But was that due to the protests themselves? Have protests been impactful or have they helped bring detriment to the Black community? And to discuss that with me is all our panel members we have with us today. Before I get into any questions, does anyone have something to start off the conversation with? Going once, going, oh, Michelle. No. Like, okay, no. So this is perfectly fine. I've had some prep questions. Okay, do you agree with the action of protesting in terms of like the actual act of protesting in general?
I would say that protests somewhat work. They help to get the word out, and grassroots organizations is really where all change begins. I think the thing that works more than protests are actual riots. Fear makes change happen. If people are scared, that's when change happens and occurs. Protests will most protests will start off as protests. Actually, let me reverse that. Most things will start with a riot and then end in protest. But without the actual riot, I don't think anyone would change anything. It's the fear of people losing it and turning society upside down in a violent manner. That's what makes change happen.
I don't disagree.
In my opinion.
Go ahead, Greg. I mean, TJ.
I was going to say that's a pretty strong point. I mean, I have seen that happen. My personal feeling on it about protests and whether or not they work, I think they can work, but I think the reason why they haven't worked like they're supposed to is because, in my opinion, you can't go back to normal, right? The only way the protests work, number one, in my opinion, is if the powers that be start to feel the impact financially. If they start hemorrhaging money, then they know that there's got to be a change.
Yeah, that'd be boycotts.
Yeah. I guess that's okay. I was thinking protests is under that realm, but yeah, maybe they're separate things. But
it's a different form of protest. Yeah.
Okay. But in my opinion, if you want lasting change, you have to make whatever you did to impact them more of a permanent situation. Now you've got leverage, right? They know you mean business, right? If you're just going to protest and make noise for a little while and then let everything go back to the way it was, then they're just, they'll let you whine, like a kid, or maybe that's being a little too harsh, but they'll let you, protest and say your bit, and they'll sit back and they'll listen until it's over because they know that it's going back to the way it was before. Once you're done getting it out of your system, in my opinion, you can't let it go back to what it was before.
Mhm.
You know, to use one of the protests that was successful back in the day, you know, the boycotting the like a busing system.
Montgomery bus boycott. Yeah.
Yeah. So imagine if that was it. We're not doing the bus no more. We'll figure out something else. But no matter what, we're not going back to that.
Hmm.
That really hurts, right? So the next time we say we're gonna protest, we're gonna do whatever, it's taken a bit more seriously, I think, and viewed upon with more gravitas.
Yeah, I think that that's a good point as far as like hurting the people who matter the most. But unfortunately, I think when it comes to things like laws and stuff like that, people who matter the most give the least amount of shit. Unfortunately, like this doesn't like as far as Congress goes and stuff like that. All these protests and flinging about and stuff like that, we've seen that these guys are able to um, obfuscate their responsibilities quite easily by thinking everything just goes away pretty much. I mean, like they were threatened, their own lives were threatened January 6th, like a couple of years ago. And half of those people didn't move a muscle in terms of the way that they operated. They moved that day because they were scared shitless. But then when they saw the trends of whatever their base was saying, they just went back to normal. Like I think that protests have become two things about protests that I don't like that I see. I think that a lot of people who protest right now are thinking that is the end of something instead of the beginning of something. I feel like they look at it as if okay, then now we've had our voices heard, now change should happen, as opposed to saying we're going to make our voices heard and then we're going to go about making change happen from the hence on out. And protests should be the first step in something, not the last step. But the biggest thing that I think about protest and why I'm leaning towards them probably not working, at least in my opinion, is that they what can I say? It's like they've been done before. The strategy is seen. Like, okay, yeah, you're gonna bitch and moan and blah 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 blah. As long as we stay cool and collective, and you know, in a couple of days, everything will go back to normal. Similar to the whole thing with the cops. Hilarious. In 2020, people were out here protesting their butts off about cop brutality, while cops were out there brutalizing people during the protest. And then they went right back to brutalizing people right after the protest stuff died down because everyone focused on the election. So it's like I I'm just frustrated. That's all. It's frustrating.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump in here. I think that protests are great in terms of bringing attention to topical matter, right? So here's this thing that's wrong, and a bunch of people across the world or the continent, US or whatever, are gonna bring attention to it by protesting, right? So you have that demonstration, attention is paid, news outlets are there, people are talked to, topic is in the air. Facilitating change, that takes stronger course of action, right? So I agree with Greg wholeheartedly that guess what, if it's something that's riotous, something that is the precipice of anarchy, that's what brings about change, because now you're impacting people who have the ability to make change in a way that's going to leave them unsettled. Do I think that that's the proper way to go about it? No, but if you go back through the annals of history, nothing ever changes without there being, a bit of the train going off of the tracks. I just brought up it, or TJ brought up an excellent example about the January 6th, right? They were about to hang Mike Pence, right? And this man went on TV afterwards and just talked like, in circles, like as if none of that was about to happen, as if he wasn't being rushed to, to be saved. We're saving your life. Who, me? Oh yeah, you. The same people you thought they were for you. No, they're after you. They want to see you. They want to see you up there. And it's one of those things that, people live in delusion, because they buy into the fact that people have this everlasting hope in the system and that circumstances will actually change. And so the longer we can give them hope, right, the more we can sustain this behind the curtain alliance of what's really being executed that's going to, in some cases, it lines their pockets, right? In some cases, it keeps an established pecking order. But if the world really went down the drain, right? And you went to a Walking Dead, Last of Us kind of world, you'd see those same folks turn into cowards real quick. Everything changes. Pleas would be copped because now there's no established guidelines, right? So when you look at the protests that happened, right? Even recently, unfortunately, with this thing just happened in Memphis, right? The protests, they know they're going to come. Oh, please don't tear things up. Please don't do that.
That's what I'm saying. But it's so scheduled now.
Right.
Like
I'm like, wait, how's there a schedule for the protest? You know, we're gonna meet in Union Square at 4:15. Let's go. How does that happen? You know, it's just bizarre. And then next thing you know, in Union Square at 4:15, there's a bunch of people with signs. You know, they don't even sell that card stock no more. And people are there writing on it and talking and yelling and being seen. And there's a helicopter. And as quiet as they came and appeared, they disappear as if nothing happened. And everybody's back to their everyday life. So in order to have that kind of change, you know what I'm saying? Unfortunately, it takes something that it's a family show. I'm going to say it would take sacrifice, right? But I don't want to see people sacrificing themselves. You know, we often hear people say they'll die for their wife or their husband or their kids or that. Those people want you to live. We have to figure out a way to create a sustainable solution that impacts people. And I think this was you, TJ, talking about the bottom line of money or something like that, right? Advertisers or something, right? So things of that nature, when you can impact somebody, now you have their attention. But until then, you know, if for every person, right, and I'm going to make sure I frame it this way intentionally, innocent or not, nobody deserves to die. Or let me say very few people deserve to die in the scenes that we've seen where cops are killing people, right? So person with a gun firing back, of course, look, you're going to have to do what you got to do there.
Correct.
But we've seen white people with axes and guns and everything, and cops still de-escalate and take them alive, right? The guy who shot up the church down in one of the Carolinas or something like that, they took him alive, even took him for a meal. You know what I'm saying? They're so kind. Who knew, right? But, you know, the one in Kentucky sleeping, you know what I'm saying, and not knowing what's going on and waking up to confusion of people trying to get into your house and shooting, she died. Breonna Taylor is one referencing. You know, it's one of those things where you're like, what are you supposed to do? You know, if you're black and you're going to a Broadway show, you might not make it back. If you're black and you are sleeping in your bed, you might not wake up. And it's not because of anything that you've done. You know, a crime is a crime. If somebody's committed a crime, by all means, you know, due process, law, all that other stuff, law and order, see it through. That does not include, nor does it give you the right to take somebody's life. And the minute you cross that line, right, consistently, almost very much in a pattern, if the same people who lives you're taking decided to wake up one day and start taking some heads and they don't stop. You remember the guy in California, right, who was a cop? They went out of their way, right? And they, again, I don't do speculation a lot. Whoever they was, they went out of their way to make sure that Christopher Dorner was taken all the way down and that there was no interview. He wasn't going to make no appearance in no courtroom. There was not going to be no microphone saying, hey, why'd you do this? You know, like the white guy who shot up the theater during Batman, Joker screening in Colorado. Yeah. There's none of that. He didn't get a chance to color his hair. It was none of that. They burned the man alive to make sure it was done, you know? So consequences have to be met with consequences in order for you to see sustainable change. And unfortunately, that either comes with a sacrifice that, you know, quite frankly, most people don't want to make. And I understand it. But on the other side of that, what do you do? And it's not until something hits home for somebody, you know, that all of a sudden there's this idea that, oh my gosh, something has to change. Because I feel like this. I think Whoopi Goldberg made mention of this last week. What if these weren't black people? What if these were little white boys? They were just popping up dead, shown on camera, getting punched in the face at 130 pounds, soaking wet, you know, with a disease and whatnot, and smacked up in Billy Club. And again, nobody's advocating for this, right? We're not advocating for that. But if that happens,
that has happened. Like there was a guy who got shot in Arizona. That was this white dude in the middle of a hotel.
Yeah, I saw that.
That was horrific.
Yeah.
Not a damn thing has changed. You know what? Oh, no, something did change. I believe they gave that police department more money, you know, so they could figure out how to train them better.
Crazy.
Michelle, did you have anything to say?
What was the question again?
Well, the original question. The original question was, do you agree with the action of protesting?
Oh, yeah. I mean, at least like others were saying, as a first step, it's good for raising awareness, and it's possible it can be effective if you have the press on your side and you already have people in power on your side, like the March on Washington. The president and the vice president were sympathetic to their cause. So like the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act were enacted within the next couple of years. Now the the March for Our Lives in response to the Parkland shooting, nationwide, the estimates were as many as 2 million people
Yeah.
marching. There were at least 800,000 in DC. Now, that spurred some more stricter gun purchasing laws around the country, and including Florida, which had some of the loosest laws in the country.
Who would
But they were
guessed?
right. So they actually, even the Republican-led government there actually enacted like a 3-day waiting period and increased the minimum buying age. So there were relatively small things, but not nothing. So yeah, demonstrate like just marching can work, but yeah, you need people like, especially the media, because it helps bring awareness to an issue. But for example, the Occupy Wall Street protests,
Mm-hmm.
they kept going for years,
Yeah.
protesting Wall Street corruption and largesse. And at the time, nobody really cared because we were coming off the roaring 90s. And so nobody was really sympathetic to them, at least not in mainstream media or in Congress. But so it's years later when reporters started exposing a lot of the corruption and the just plain old fraud on the part of Wall Street. The popular opinions start slowly turning against Wall Street and the tycoons there, and so people are starting to care more. I mean, and so I've read that it can take a while for a protest to have an effect. Like I was reading articles about successful protests. One of the frequently cited ones was the Women's Suffrage Parade of 1913. It was just a calm, scheduled march, but and the 19th Amendment wasn't ratified for another 7 years, but it is credited with like spurring like more popular support for the idea. So it can work, and I think it also depends on what kind of protests you're talking about. Like boycotts are important. Boycotts are credited with helping end apartheid in South Africa, but again, that included the U.S. government and governments of other countries participating in this boycott. And let's see, strikes are also an important method of protest.
That's a tough
Now, do you get to rioting and rebellion? I'm like, yeah, sometimes you do have to get like a lot of these articles also cite the Boston Tea Party, which technically was vandalism and robbery, and it ended in a massive war. But on the Gandhi was protesting something very similar, Britain's monopoly of salt in India, and he spurred on local producers to start evaporating seawater and making their own salt to compete with Britain and their monopoly and over Indian salt, the salt industry in India. But that was coupled with marches and disobedient civil acts of civil disobedience, but it did help spur the end of British rule. So like ours was a violent revolution in the end, and India's was a peaceful revolution, but it did they did accomplish what they wanted in the end. So
I mean, there's a couple other things that probably help conflate the fact that they let India go, like coming off of World War and all that stuff. But
and India was, Britain was starting to go broke.
Exactly. But I mean, that whole Wall Street thing was funny because when you were saying it, I was like, yo, what did they do with that when they started finding all those frauds and stuff? I wonder how they fixed that. And it occurred to me they did fix it by giving them more money. So that's what I.
Oh yeah, like it actually hasn't really been fixed. But yeah, popular opinion has started turning against them, and there's like, at least now, the administration's like Treasury Department and Federal Trade Commission, they're actually suing monopolies and taking stricter looks into the kinds of mutual fund practices and investment vehicles that Wall Street comes up with, because they're often just junk ways to defraud public retirement systems and stuff. But nobody used to care, and people finally do care. So that's something.
I suppose. Let's talk about the rioting aspect of it. Do you think that would be like actually? I know that in the short term, it probably would be effective because people care much more about buildings than they do people. But in the long term, do you actually think that that's something that would work? Because I think that the reason why this country is still standing is because people chose not to riot. Because for all intents and purposes, we should have burned this place down a long time ago.
Well, like I said, when it comes to those kinds of things, based on the history of this country, there's only two things that people they can really make real significant change, and that is violence and money. If you affect either one of those, if people are scared, things will change. If money starts going missing, people will change. Those are the two aspects of where we'd have to hit anything realistically in order to make some things happen for us. Because most people, I mean, seeing horrific things happen to people on film is almost commonplace now.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, they made it an everyday thing. Like it's not even shocking anymore.
I say it's almost commonplace now, and the only thing that would have to really, really change if we wanted things to change more rapidly, the people, white people, would have to get more involved with making this change. See, because we can, it's not exactly all on us. If this change is going to happen, it's going to have to happen through white people. They're going to have to be better. We're doing our part.
Yeah, but that's so discouraging. I mean, like they haven't helped for 400 years.
Exactly. But you know what would make them help?
Am I wrong? I'm not wrong, right? Like, I mean,
threat of violence.
No.
I mean, there's been handfuls here sprinkled here and there. I'm talking about a majority of.
I'm not saying all of them. I'm saying like in general.
In general, as a people, no, they have not.
Yeah, and so.
But like I said,
go ahead.
Money or blood. Those are the only way things that change in this country. Like I said, when America wanted to become its own country, they didn't go about a bunch of picket signs and just sit on the border of Britain and be like, we want no taxes and blah, blah, blah. They strapped up. They strapped up and got ready.
Worked for France too.
Yeah.
And got rid of their monarchy. And
well,
that was
for Haiti. It worked
very
for Haiti
violent
too.
revolution.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, it did. I mean, like until like when they solved that problem, I believe they said, "Don't give those bastards anything."
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, I think that's right. I don't know what the difference was though. I can't really tell.
Now, when it coming back to the cops thing, there was like almost 2 weeks of riots after the Rodney King thing. And there were supposed reforms, but how much has really changed since then? I don't know.
I mean, I guess Rampart's out of here, but other than that.
What?
I said Rampart's out of here, but other than that, I don't know. I mean, LA's the black and whites over there were notorious for doing crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Antoine, you lived over there, so I'm sure that you have more. Well, you had a story already that was shocking.
Yeah.
But I'm sure I was like gassed. But I'm sure that there's plenty of stories that could be told by people who grew up in that area. There's actually like a really good I guess it's more of a documentary called Burn Mother Lover, the real of course. And it talks about the riots, but it basically talks about how it was all the way up in LA with the relationship between the cops and black people all the way up through the riots, and how the riots was really more about, it was just as much about the teenage girl that got shot in the back of the head as it was about
Natasha. Yeah.
So
orange juice. Stealing orange juice. And
which she didn't steal. She paid for it.
Allegedly stealing orange juice.
Exactly.
Reading about the really bad tensions between like the Korean community there too and the black community.
Yeah, and it's because of I mean, you just listen to any Ice Cube record, you could probably figure it out. I'm not really not. PJ, what do you think about the rioting idea?
So frame it again. So you were asking if writing was effective? Is that what
Yeah,
it is?
pretty much. Like I know that for the short term, it seems like it's going to get some results, but long term, do you think that that's something that's really sustainable or a good idea? Honestly,
I'm going to use the mantra for real estate: location, location, location.
Hmm.
So there's a big difference between rioting your own neighborhood and rioting an embassy, right? They're very, very different. I think the results from those riots are going to be different as well. If you want to get, if you want to do it through violence, then I think you have to make it so that, unfortunately, the pain is felt by people that are outside of your normal sphere. So if we're suffering down here, I don't want to tear up down here, right? If you're suffering down here because of something happening on the other side of the tracks, huddle up, go to the other side of the tracks, make the bedlam and mayhem over there. If they're not feeling safe, then something is going to change, right? Something. It may not be everything that you want. It may not even be in your favor.
I was his spell negative. That's
but if we're talking about change, then good or bad, I think that would affect things. If you tear up your own stuff, I don't think it's going to really change anything. Like if I mean we'll use a close to home example with kids. If they tear up their own room, they're not going to get anything, right? If they go and they tear up your room or pull the TV down and do all this other kind of stuff, something's going to be different. They may get a spanking or something, but
might be walking a little different. That's what that is.
Right, but I mean, maybe now instead of having a TV on a coffee table, and maybe you mount it on the wall. I don't know, but the point is there's going to be some kind of a change. So I think, yeah, I think that rioting can be an effective vehicle potentially for change, but I think where you do that is going to determine what the results are or how much results are gained.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump in. I think that ultimately allyship has to speak up, right? So if you go through a room full of non-people of color, primarily white people, right, who benefit from 400 plus years of things, and you say, hey, I don't know, something simple. What does Black History Month mean to you? We're in Black History Month, right? You might get one or two people who speak up. You know what the bulk of them are going to do? They're going to wait for the topic to be over, and they're going to go back to their life as usual, right? Because
Antoine, they're going to be like, it's an important conversation, and I'm glad we're having it.
Exactly. I'm glad we're having it, meaning you're talking about it, and we're going to say, oh, man, and make things and bite lips, and you're like, listen, why do you have nothing to say on the matter, right? Aligned interests is where change happens at, right? So we're talking about non-bloodshed, right? If there's an aligned interest, then people will get together and facilitate change. If there's no aligned interest and it's not going to change their lives for the better, most people, they don't want anything to do with that, right? There's no, I was talking about South Central off camera. There's no aligned interest for people to go in the blood and crip shit that's been going on for probably longer than we all been living, right? Guess what? There's not. But if there was, because if these things were taking place in a certain space, it would have ended years ago, right? It would have ended years ago. There'd be a monument commemorating how this stopped, who stopped it, the dedicational ceremony every year. But the problem is the group of folks that it impacts, it does them no justice to stop it. When you talk about the unfortunate circumstances that take place with a lot of those who are supposed to be serving us in their communities, right? Guess what? There's no aligned interest unless something that impacts them, right? Stops it. What is one thing that impacts them? We all talked about funding, because even just a smidgen, you're going from 400 million this year to 325. Oh, whoa, what are we doing here? Why do you even need that much money? But guess what? It's just the fact that when they're accustomed to something, it goes into that whole thing that's been going on for years, right? And so supremacy of any kind is bad. And so you have to have a balance, and you have to have inclusion to a certain degree. And the inclusion part should not be the victims having to lead every conversation, right? So if it is cop or group of cops who are killing somebody, it should not be on the victims to talk about what needs to change. It needs to be on the folks who are the aggressors in those situations that have created the carnage, leading those discussions and the actual change. It shouldn't be on the parents who lost those kids up in Sandy Hook to have to figure out what to do. Dealing with the loss of their children, I'm sure, was hard enough, right? And still is hard enough. What about the people who were there, right? They're supposed to make that change. What was the latest one? Something, Texas or whatever, the same thing, where the cops just kind of sat down.
Right.
Uvalde. Yeah, I didn't want to say the name wrong. Say it again, I'm sorry. Uvalde, right? And we saw on video. I'm not going down there. Wait a minute. This is your specialty. And you're dealing with people who are innocent souls. For anything that somebody want to say, somebody committed a crime, they broke in a house, they stole a car, they stole some rims. These people were learning. These little people who are trying to become middle-sized people, to become big people and become grown people, would never get there, right? Because of the fact that whatever happened, happened. And we'll leave that there. But you have a chance to stop that, and you don't, right? But you will then go right back and advocate for weapons and this and that. Were conversations after that were absolutely just astoundingly ridiculous.
Oh, they were. Yeah, harming in schools. Remember
right.
That one?
Right. I almost forgot about that one. Yeah. And it's like, what do you do? You know? And I said this years ago to a coworker, right? And, you know, we were out to lunch and having a conversation. Again, surprise, it was a mass shooting kind of thing that happened. Those become the norm in the U.S. to the point where we're almost desensitized to it. And I said, none of this stops unless there's bloodshed. And people are always like, whoa, what do you mean? And I'm like, that's the history of the world, baby. The only way things change is if you draw a hard line in the sand and you say, if you cross this line one more time, I'm going to show you something. You can infer show you something to mean what it needs to mean for our general audience. But the point being, once that show you something takes off and people are running for their lives and they can't just go back to their safe haven, because there is no safe haven, change happens. And I'm not advocating for that, because you know what I want? I want the people who are supposed to be allies, who will tell you that they're an ally, to speak up. And that goes between things of race relations. Like, I don't know when we got to this point, and I know, but just being crazy here, you know, where, you know, Black people are just seen as not having any value in life, you know, so it's okay for this to happen. But over here, if this happens, hey, things have got to change. This is out of hand. We got moms against guns and all this other stuff now. And it's like, no, nobody should ever have to die by that. You know, like, I always have a joke that I tell people that, look, if there are space aliens waiting to invade Earth, my goodness, they would be getting the greatest laugh ever. Just like, what do we have to do? Look at this. Look at the material. Like, people don't know, you know, we're taking each other down and out and arguing.
Well, Fox would take the alien side. They'd be like, well, you know, it's not Obama.
What? Listen, immediately. immediately. You know, and it's like, it's a thing where at this point, human life matters, right? And I want people to really get a sense of understanding. If people come together, right, we'd be so much further ahead. That Jetson future that we used to see when we were kids, we'd be way past that at this point. But the problem is, people can't get on the same page, because, you know what? It's okay if these folks lose life, or if this happens to this person, or what have you. So riots, I personally don't agree with them, but I understand. I do, you know, because, I mean, look, I'm not going to tell somebody that if a repeated thing where people who came and set up camp in the community that you live in are taking out people and killing folks, that, you know what, maybe you feel like taking a TV today. It's not for me to say that. But you know what I want to see them do? In the words of T here, I want you to go where it matters, and you cause something there. And now you're going to get the ire of those folks, because those folks are going to say, you better do something, because they keep coming over here and X, Y, and Z is happening, right? It's really that simple. And as disgustingly simple as that sounds, is really not, obviously, right? It's ultra complicated, because you're dealing with, there are people who are kind of like laying in wait for like some kind of anarchy to happen, like a lawless world. And I think TV makes it look beautiful. It makes it look attractive. It's not. If right now you couldn't go outside and go to the grocery store or go to 7-Eleven or anything like that without potentially losing your life, everything becomes a lot more serious.
Yeah.
And so I just want people to really approach, you know, the right people with our lives with that, to realize that, look, we shouldn't have to get to the point of rioting or tearing up a community or anything to get progress. Like, listen to people. And I'll be transparent with you. I sat with a bunch of white people here recently, right? And I was talking about Black history, you know, and because people have questions about Black History Month, and my thing was sit with some Black folks, right? Just have general conversation with them, because some of you wouldn't be caught dead walking outside with them, because almost like, you know, it's going to impact your credibility or something. Listen to their story.
No, just the credit, just the credit, Antoine.
Yeah, my bad.
That's the credit.
And I encourage them to take time to understand some of the things they go through in their everyday life. It's not a joke. It's not made up. You know, it's not comical. You know, whether it's discrimination, profiling, all of it is discrimination. But some of the things that Black people have gone through for many years of their life is not 400 years. We're in 2023. And you go into TJ Maxx right now with an extra hat on in the wintertime, somebody's going to be behind you, you know, and they're going to ask you, they need help like 4 times. They might turn around and put up a sign that says, we have a right to go through your bag no matter what, blah, 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 crossing off a bunch of stuff that really says, man, that's me. And then, you know, it creates a experience that's not, you know, desirable, because then people don't want to go in there. Now they don't want to go in your store, but now you start hitting their pockets. You start shopping on Amazon. Now it's like, hey, we are inclusive. Come on in here. Come on.
He said inclusive. Let me go to Michelle about the rioting question, and then I'm going to move to something else. Michelle, closing word on the rioting part of this.
I mentioned the revolutions of the olden days, the French Revolution. That went straight to rioting, I think, and
yes,
they tossed it monarchy, but a lot of people died in that, were brutally executed. I think, like, yeah, I agree. It should be considered a last resort if people in power don't respond to anything else. But I think a lot of the steps in between, like strikes and boycotting, can be quite effective.
So I'm caught up here. There's actually, I almost want to ask everybody, only because of time constraints, the finale question of do protests work? But I wanted to get this off. People can be quick with this one. Do you feel that protests are played out? Because I say, yeah, I think protests are played out.
I'm gonna jump in and be quick as hell. Yes.
Yes.
In their current form, yes.
Michelle?
Yeah, if you're just marching, yes. I think. Right. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Good God. All right. No,
I didn't hear. I thought you was still going on. My fault. Yeah, absolutely. They're played out.
Okay. So look, all that being said, we've said a lot, and it's been great because I haven't really had to rely on the questions, but I'm going to use this to wrap it up. Last but not least, and give your best answer or the answer that you want to go with. Do you feel that protests work? And I suppose you could just say, I guess we could say in its current form if we wanted to be more precise with it. So do you feel protests work? Anybody can jump in. Michelle, looks like you're about to go. Go ahead.
Yes. Like if depending on, as I said, depends on what kind of, what sort of protest you're doing. I wanted to bring up one fun kind of form of protest that was actually quite effective.
Really?
Have you ever heard of the Liberian sex strike of 2003?
Yeah, I think they made a movie about that.
Yeah.
Oh, the Chirac.
Liberian women went on a successful sex strike and ended the country's civil war.
I'm gonna be honest with you, man. Like, and that was a brutal civil war, the Liberian one.
Yeah.
But I would think that would cause more people.
That's a form of protest.
I would think more people gonna get shot if they do something like that. I don't think people do that.
Women and female partners of gang members in Pereira, I don't know Colombia, withheld sex as they demanded fewer guns and less violence. And within a few years, the murder rate had fallen by almost 27%. So that's a form of protest that can work.
Now, I do have to push back on the fact that you said the fun form of protest. That doesn't sound like any fun to me.
I mean, it's a fun fact.
It's a fun. There you go.
It's a little out there.
That doesn't sound fun at all.
Not the form of protest I would think of, but perhaps it should be used more.
Now, those women, they're the real gang members. I'm just playing. Let's go to, I could either go myself unless someone else wants to jump in. In its current form, I don't think protests work because and maybe this is just me being too bombastic as far as like it having to happen quickly or hastily or something to that effect, but I don't feel like we've seen a lot. Like I said, the Tyree Nichols thing, yeah, they arrested the cops. They put him on, you know, they're gonna put him on trial. They fired him and all that stuff, and they did it in a timely manner. However, the caveat of race still lies in the background with the fact that they chose to do this when it was all of these black officers, which is the same thing they did in Minnesota. It seems like they can find a way to get to justice when it comes to black people doing it to other black people, and it's a black officer. They can say, "Oh, let's throw these dudes under the bus and let people think that things are getting better when the culture is not getting any better." Um, so in its current form, I feel like it's, I don't want to say it's hopeless in terms of doing it this certain way. I just think that I think that it's time for us to come up with a new playbook. Um, you know, I think that the people that we're dealing with are shameless, so you can't shame America into doing the right thing. Martin Luther King caught the right people at the right time. You know what I mean? Like, you know, you can't shame people into doing the right thing anymore. And I think they've caught hip to the game that we want to be able to build this country without destroying it. And they said, "Oh, well, you're not really going to do this. You're not really going to run up and do this." So I think that they think that we're selling wolf tickets, quite honest with you. So I would say no, that they don't.
I'll jump in. So I think that I'm going to agree with you and Michelle. So a little 50-50 here. On one hand, I do find them progressive and working. If you're talking about how the nurses here in New York City, the hospitals went on a strike and were protesting because they know that nothing moves without them. So they got what they want, right? So that you have to do that in that space. They didn't need to necessarily go to the extremes, right? But if you're talking about police brutality or anything else like that, the more extreme the activity, I think you have to kind of meet the level of intensity. And so in that case, I agree with Aj that, you know, we need a playbook, right? And that's the only way that you're going to get proper change there. If you go with the same playbook again and again, history tells us, I was about to throw out another story, but for the sake of time, I'm just going to say we'll get the same results, right? So if nothing changes, nothing changes. And so that's how it goes.
I'm a little upset about not hearing that story.
You said me?
Yeah.
I'm gonna go like power without perception here, so I'll try to be short though.
Right.
I'm gonna say that protests are successful in bringing attention, but I feel that they are not successful in bringing results or outcomes. So to me, because I'm more outcome oriented or focused, they don't work because even though attention is good, and maybe some people might even say that it's required, it is not the outcome that was sought after when the protest was set up, right? I mean, people don't go out there and march just so that people can say, "Yeah, I hear you," right? March so people say, "Yeah, I hear you," and these things are going to be done because of you know, your expression of or I guess you cry out for change. So yeah, I'm gonna say that they don't. I mean, they're successful in bringing attention, but it's been proven that now they just wait for things to die down and go back to normal. And that goes back to what I was saying in the very beginning. If you let things go back to normal, you will get nothing. So ultimately, I guess I'm gonna say that they don't work.
Great, close this out, man.
Protesting at this point sounds like some waste of time shit to me.
Yeah. What's happened there? What happened there?
What happened is the truth is what happened. In this format, and the way it's generally done, with the marching in the streets and the signs and the yelling and all this other stuff, it's just not, it's not enough. We need to use a stronger form of getting our point across. And there's, like I said, there's two ways to go about this. There's either violence or money. I would suggest that we find a way to hurt people's pockets. If you take away the money, people will start listening. If you start ruining someone's bottom line, they'll listen up and they'll be like, okay, hold on a second, let's make a deal here. That's what happens when you start affecting the money.
Well, hey, that's our show for today, folks. We'd like to thank everybody for watching. Follow us on Facebook at The Black Advancement, on Twitter at Black Advancement, BLK Advancement. Or on IG at what was it? No, it's also BLK Advancement. And also on our website, which is www.blackadvancement.com. Until next time, peace and advance.